to week 3 of I Know It Sounds Crazy, but It's True. Today we're going to be going over another really crazy Bible story, and I hope y'all really enjoy it. So, before we get into the story, I have a question for y'all. Is there something that makes you feel different from everybody else, but it also makes you feel like you're not as special as them? Well, lots of us, there's probably something about us that makes us feel that way. It could be something like you wear glasses so you can't see as well and you make, I don't feel as special, or you're not as athletic as one of your friends, can't run as fast. Maybe you're not as artistic as some of your friends and it makes you feel not as special. Well, in today's Bible story and lesson, we're going to be learning all about this guy in the Bible and how he had something different about him that made him probably feel not as special, but God was still able to use him in an amazing way. So before we get into the lesson, let's go ahead and read a Bible verse. And this is what it is. It's a really familiar one. We've gone over it tons of times in class. It says, "For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." Philippians 4:13. That means that through everything that we go through, that God gives us strength to face all things, that he empowers us to keep on going on and to be strong through all things. So I'm going to read it to you one more time. Philippians 4:13. "I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." You know, God is the one that empowers us to do what we got to do. So let's go ahead and read the Bible story. And this is what the Bible story says. It is the story of Ehud and the fat king. And today's crazy Bible story is found in Judges chapter 3. And this is what happened. So this is in the Old Testament, and the people, they have just gone into the promised land. They've been there for a couple of generations, and the people, they began to turn away from God. They began doing all sorts of evil, bad, sinful things. And because of that, God allowed an enemy country to come in and rule over them because they were disobedient. And during this time, there was this new king, an evil king, came to rule over them. And this king was King Eglon. And King Eglon, he was a really big, fat king and a really, really mean guy. And after a little bit, the Israelites realized that they had sinned and that they needed to turn back to God. So they began to cry out to God, "God, rescue us, save us." And they turned back to God. So God raised up a man for them, a warrior. And this guy's name was Ehud. Now, Ehud, he had something special about him, something different that probably made him feel not as special as everybody else. He was left-handed. And back then, well, if you would have looked around, all the warriors around him were probably right-handed. So to him, he would have been different. Everybody else was fighting using their sword with their right hand, and he probably had lots of hard times trying to learn how to fight because he was just different than everybody else. Everybody else probably looked down on him because of it. But despite all of that, God had an awesome plan for him. Now, we'll get back to that in a second. So, back then, because they had a king ruling over them, they needed to go and send their tax money to this new king. So, they decided that Ehud should be the one to bring the money. So he gathered up the money, and what else he did was he took for himself a dagger. He made it for himself. Now, a dagger, it's just a really, really short sword. So he took this sword. Sorry, I gotta fix my light. He took his sword, and because it was left-handed, he put it on his right side, so the opposite side, so he could reach and grab the sword. So he had it on his right side, and all the other warriors, so they would have had their sword on their left side. So when Ehud went up to go meet the king, the security guards, they went, checked, and they checked on his left side to see if there was sword there, because that's where all the warriors would have had it. And they checked, he didn't have a sword there, so they went ahead, let Ehud go on before the king. So Ehud, he was able to get in there still with his dagger. So Ehud, he got in there and was like, King, I have a secret for you. So the king was like, all right. And he sent all of his guards, all of his servants out of the room. So Ehud, he walked up to the king, and the king was probably like, all right, what's secret? Lean close. And Ehud said, I have a secret for you from the Lord. He listened up, and then Ehud took his sword and stabbed it right into the fat King Eglon's stomach, and and all the fat swallowed up the sword and surrounded it. So then he couldn't see the sword anymore, so he left this sword inside of him and killed the king. So then Ehud, after that, he made sure that the doors were locked, and he ran and he escaped out the window. Now, the servants and the guards, after a little while, they were kind of concerned, like, hey, what's taking the king so long? They knocked, he didn't answer, so they thought, maybe he's using the bathroom or something. And so, but by the time they were able to get in there and found the king dead, Ehud had gone, and he ran and told all the people what happened. He said, guess what, guys? The king, he's dead. Let us rise up against our enemy and reclaim our land. So that's what they did. So God was able to use a left-handed man who was different than everybody else to be able to save the day. So we're going to learn more about how God can use us even though we're different in the lesson. All right, guys. Hey kids, how you doing? Now it's time for our lesson. So the lesson is called Used by God. So in the Bible story, we learned all about Ehud and how God used him to go and kill the evil king that was oppressing the people of Israel. We learned how that he was a left-handed person and everybody else around him was right-handed. And people probably looked down on him and thought he would be useless as a warrior just because he was left-handed and just because he was different than everybody else around. It's crazy how people make judgments about others based off the silliest things, like, oh, they're not tall enough. They're short. How can they play basketball? Oh, they're not smart enough. There's no way that they can get that job. And people judge each other based off of such the silliest things. And maybe you've been a victim to that. Maybe someone has judged you before and said that you weren't good enough, said that you weren't capable of doing something, and that really made you feel sad and really made you feel down about yourself. But here's some good news. That it doesn't matter what other people say about you. Throughout the Bible, we find this out over and over and over again. For example, in the Bible, people would have thought that David, as a shepherd, would have never been able to go and kill a giant. People would have thought that Abraham, as an old man, would have never been able to have a kid in his old age. And then people would have thought Saul would have never become a Christian because he was going around and killing Christians, but God changed his life around. See, lots of times people are wrong, and they make judgments about other people so quickly. And it's important to remember that, yeah, when people make judgments about you, they're probably wrong. You can always prove them wrong with God's help. It doesn't matter how other people label you. You may feel sometimes like you're not smart enough. Well, God, he gives us the wisdom that we need. You may feel like you're not strong enough. God gives us the strength that we need, and we can rely on him. Now, sometimes, though, it's not other people telling us that we're not good enough. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. Sometimes we look in the mirror when we wake up in the morning, and what do you see? Whenever you're looking in the mirror, are you thinking, man, I wish I was taller. Man, I wish I had red hair like Mr. Ben. Man, I wish I had this. Man, I wish I didn't have that. Man, I wish I was stronger. Man, I wish I was skinnier. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and we think all sorts of negative things about ourselves. And we say, I can't do that. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not handsome enough. I can't do it. But the good thing is, it doesn't matter what we think about ourselves. Yeah, these negative thoughts, they can really hurt us, and they can be harmful and not allow us to be able to, may keep us from wanting to do what God has for us. And it may discourage us. And, And Ehud, for example, in the story, if he would have, maybe he thought of himself at some point, like, how am I supposed to kill this king? How am I supposed to help liberate these people? I'm left-handed. Everybody else, all the other warriors are right-handed. How can I be the man for the job? But you know what? Instead of listening to doubts of other people that they might have had, or maybe he had his own doubts, instead of listening to those doubts, he went through and did the plan of God, and he was able to liberate the people. So there's one final point, and that is what matters is what God thinks about you. So it doesn't matter what other people think about you. It doesn't matter what you think about yourself. What matters is what God thinks about you. And the Bible says that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The Bible tells us how God has a plan and a purpose for each and every single one of our lives. And I want to share with y'all a Bible verse real fast. It's 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. And this is what it says. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. That's so amazing. People, they're so quick to judge based off of appearances. But God, He doesn't look at the outside. He doesn't look at skin color. He doesn't look at whether you're a boy or a girl or things like that. Instead, He looks at your heart. He doesn't care if you're tall. He doesn't care if you're short. Instead, He looks at your heart, and He has a calling for y'all. And He wants to use y'all for amazing things. And when we get over the judgments that other people have about us, or things that we feel about ourselves, and we listen to God, God is able to use us in amazing ways. Just like God used Ehud to liberate His people and change the world, God can use each and every single one of you if you listen to Him and allow Him to. So that's all we got for you today. All I got for you today. And just remember, God can use you. It doesn't matter what other people say about you. All right, guys, I love you all. See you later.